Welcome to the Actuaries in the Wild podcast. I started this podcast because I believe that actuaries are more than just your stereotypical number crunchers that sit at a computer all day. Many of us have endeavors that go beyond the traditional actuarial realm. My goal is to meet those actuaries who have ventured from their desks to explore their passions. It's time to meet the actuaries in the wild. Today's actuary in the wild is Melissa Huenefeldt. Welcome, Melissa.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, Melissa, I want to start out by finding a little bit of information about your background. Tell us about yourself, including what made you decide to become an actuary and about your actuarial career.
Yeah, so I'm a consulting actuary for Milliman. I'm out of the Chicago practice, but I'm based in Kansas City. I've lived in Kansas City, the metropolitan area, for most of my life. I had a bit of a non-traditional start in terms of how I went the actuarial path. It's kind of funny. I actually had a high school teacher recommend that I study actuarial science, and I thought insurance sounded boring, and so
Yeah.
I decided to go the math ed route. And I started studying math ed, and then I did an observation in a high school classroom and decided it wasn't for me.
Mhm.
God bless the teachers out there. And so then I decided to double major in math and psychology. Got my degrees from University of Central Missouri in Warrensburg, Missouri. And after about a year of not being able to find a job with just a bachelor's in math or just a bachelor's in psychology, I decided to go back for my master's in applied mathematics, also from
Yeah.
UCM. And as I was studying for that, I got a position at the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services, working in the Bureau of HIV, STD, and AIDS,
Okay.
which was extremely interesting. But I wasn't doing math; it was
Yeah.
basically dividing to come up with incident rates.
Okay.
And I had a coworker send me a newspaper clipping back in the days when people still clipped things out of newspapers. And in 2006, I got my first actuarial position at Missouri Farm Bureau. In fact, my boss was your guest in episode 4, Michelle
Right.
Shepard. And she hired me without any exams. And I started taking exams and realizing insurance isn't as boring as I thought. And so I spent about 18 months at Farm Bureau. I met my now husband. Um, and I continued to work on my master's during that whole period. I finished my master's, and in fact, I defended my thesis the same day I took FM. So
Yeah.
that was a pretty stressful day, but I knew I wanted to make it back to Kansas City eventually. And I got a job with Lockton Companies, a global insurance broker, and was working as an analyst, and eventually um, made my way up to a analytics team leader. And after 13 years there, I decided, I really want to use my actuarial designation. And then I switched over to Milliman last October and finished up my fellowship in the Casualty Actuarial Society this past spring. And yeah, so I love it. It's been a great year. About me personally, though, because I am more than just an actuary. I have two daughters. One of them's almost 10, and the other one is 7. They keep me very busy, especially since they're that age where they want to do all the activities.
Yeah.
I'm a runner, craft beer enthusiast, and I'm also a registered yoga teacher.
So you mentioned, and this is Actuaries in the Wild is why our podcast, and what makes you the actuary in the wild is you mentioned that you're a runner, that you run marathons. In fact, you just ran one this past Sunday, I believe. Talk about how you got started running marathons.
Yeah, I did. I ran the Route 66 marathon in Tulsa. And that's actually the 12th unique state that my sister and I have run in, which I guess we're unofficially going for 50 states. I started running in 2014. I had my oldest daughter in 2013 and was still struggling to get some of that baby weight off. And my sister was running and
Mhm.
she really enjoyed it. And she noticed a bunch of health benefits as a result. And so I thought, maybe I'll give it a try. So January 2014, I signed up for my first 5K. And I was really nervous. I thought I was going to have to walk a lot of it. And my sister said, don't worry about the distance. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
And I ran it. And I mean, it was slow. But I made it, and I said, that wasn't so bad. So I signed up for my next 5K in February and finished that. And then I vowed to myself that year that I was going to sign up for at least a 5K every month.
Right.
And in fact, that summer I ended up doing a Tough Mudder, which is way more than a 5K, with all the obstacles and all the mud. And then
Yeah.
I also did a sprint triathlon. And so I continued training and improving and enjoying it more and more, and signed up for my first 10K in September. And I thought, I can do a half marathon. So I signed up for a half marathon. That was going to be February 2015. And I found out in January 2015 that I was pregnant with my youngest. And I
Okay.
still ran the half marathon. Like I kept it slow. My doctor said, just keep your heart rate down. But I wanted to, take a real stab at it. I kept my running up while I was pregnant, just little 5Ks here and there. And then after I had my daughter, I signed up for a half marathon in February 2016, and which is 4.5 months postpartum for those counting
Yeah.
at home. But I ran it and enjoyed it, and I thought, I saw my sister running marathons. I'm like, there's no way I'm ever going to do that. But somehow I got talked into running my first full marathon in November of 2016. And that was the Las Vegas Rock and Roll Marathon. And sometime during that race, my sister and I were running. We already planned our next marathon. So it's a bit of an addiction.
I see. So you've now run 19 marathons plus numerous other races, including 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons. You mentioned the Mutter. What is the process for training for these marathons?
Yeah, so I would say that it's best to start maybe about 4 months before your race. And you don't want to ramp up too quickly. You want to, you know, you don't want to shock your body into adding too much mileage too quickly. So what my training plan, or what I usually do, is I'll usually run 2 to 3 miles, 2 to 3 days a week during the week. And some of that I will run faster, just to incorporate some speed. Sometimes I'll do it at an
Hmm.
incline to incorporate some kind of hill training. I also add in some strength training, and as I mentioned, I'm a yogi. I practice yoga about 2 to 3
Hmm.
times a week. It just helps with the core strength, the flexibility. I've noticed my posture is a lot better, which is important as a runner.
Yeah,
And then my sister and I run a long run every Saturday, and it depends on what part of our training we're in. That long run is going to be somewhere between 10 and 20 miles. A marathon is 26.2, but once you get up to that 18-mile or 20-mile long run, you're mostly training for that mental aspect.
I see.
You know that your body can do it, especially if you've done it before. You're like, okay, I know I can do this. But that it does become a mental exercise. The long runs are great also to figure out what clothes are going to be comfortable for race day, how you should hydrate, what kind of fuel you should take, if you want to take like those goos and pouches, or I like the energy blocks. Those tend to work for me. And then also, you can determine what to eat for dinner the night before, breakfast the morning
I
of,
see.
just so that you can avoid any gastrointestinal issues on the course. But my sister and I, we keep a marathon on the calendar at all times. It just
I see.
helps to keep up the motivation, and seems like we never stop training at this point.
So, what has been your favorite place to run a marathon or another race?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Because we've run some iconic runs like New York and Chicago. Those are pretty big ones. And I've run the Mayor's Marathon in Anchorage, Alaska, and I did my first run was the Vegas Strip at night. So you're running at
Okay.
night down the Vegas Strip, seeing all the lights. But I would say probably my favorite was Disney World.
Okay.
So in January 2020, we snuck it in before the pandemic started. My sister and I did the Dopey Challenge, which is 4 races over 4 days. On the Thursday of the weekend, you run the 5K. On the Friday, you run the 10K. Saturday's the half marathon, and Sunday's the full marathon. And so that's a total of 48.6
Right.
miles. It's quite a bit, but it's a lot of fun because there's characters out on the course. You get your pictures taken with. People dress up in costumes. Some people even ride the rides in the
Hmm.
park.
Okay.
Or as they're running through Epcot, they might buy a beer or a margarita as they're
Hmm.
running through that part of the course. So it's kind of a party. It's a lot of fun.
I see. So mentioning the beer margaritas, and you talked about this a little bit in the intro, but one of the other things that makes you an actuary in the wild is you said you're a craft beer enthusiast. Tell me a little bit more about that and how you've incorporated that with your running.
Yeah. So I call myself a craft beer enthusiast, but I think that's just a fancy way of saying beer snob.
Yeah.
um, so once I realized that there are beers out there other than the cheap stuff I drank in college, and I realized that beer is better than I expected. I remember when I first had my first craft beer, and I'm like, oh, this is good. It
Hmm.
doesn't taste like corn water. And I realized that there's just a lot of nuances to beer. You've
Hmm.
got the malts, they can make the beer taste caramely or chocolatey or nutty. You got the hops, which add aroma and taste that's either citrusy or piney or flowery. And so I found that drinking beer was as complex as drinking wine.
I
There's a
see.
lot into it. So I started drinking a lot of beer, not to get drunk, but just to
Yeah.
to enjoy the nuances. I'm on the app Untapped. I've been on there since June of 2016, and I'm a little embarrassed to say that I have close to 4,700 unique beers.
Okay.
And if anybody wants to add me, I'm Casey Melissa. So feel free to add me on there and follow all the beer I drink. But I guess the way that I've incorporated that into running, some races have a finish line festival where there's free
Hmm.
beer, or you have a tag on your bib that says, you can redeem it for a free beer. This race I ran this past weekend, the free beer was from Welltown Brewing in Tulsa. So sometimes there's local breweries that supply the after race beer. And yes, I checked it into Untapped
Yeah.
because and usually when I do that, I have to take a little picture with my medal wrapped around the cup to show, hey, I earned this beer. But
Yeah.
not necessarily craft brewing, but other alcohol, I guess. It's kind of fun. Some races go through neighborhoods, and a lot of the people can't get out of their driveways, so they turn it into an opportunity to spectate. And it's a lot of neighborhoods. People will come out and they'll set up a little table in their front yard, and they'll hand out mimosas, or they'll hand out beer or seltzers,
Hmm.
or other things. And my sister and I, when we run for fun, we run to finish. And so we joke that if somebody's going to offer us free alcohol on the course, shoot, we're going to take it. We say, it's quick calories because you
Yeah.
are burning a lot of calories. And if you're just drinking a quick 50 calories worth of a sample of a seltzer or something, it's a good way to replenish.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a painkiller sometimes. And then also it can be really refreshing. It's surprising how good a beer tastes at about mile 20. But
Yeah.
so one of the things that we've started doing just based on our experiences is we've started carrying like airline bottles of Fireball in our hydration vests so that we can have them during the race. And we got that tradition when we ran Grandma's Marathon in June of this year. When we went and to mile 20. As soon as we entered that mile, there was a couple standing out there pouring shots of Fireball. And we're like, you know what? It put a little extra fire in our bellies, and we were able to get going, and we were able to finish that last 10K. And one thing we discovered this past weekend, Fireball is like the runner's drink. We didn't we carry it, but there were lots of people carrying it in their fuel belts or in their vests.
That's
And
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, I wouldn't have guessed that that would have been a runner's choice, but at this race this past weekend, there was a lot of Fireball. In fact, around mile 11, there was a table set up, and it actually had it said official block party, like it was race provided. And at this table, they had blueberry tequila, peach moonshine, Miller Lite, Jello shots, Fireball, as one would imagine. And like I said, I'm a beer snob, but give me a Miller Lite near the halfway point, and that is like the best tasting beer I've ever had.
Not being a runner, these are things I guess I wouldn't have guessed about marathons. Yeah, it's really interesting to know this.
Yeah, well, and I'll tell you, like I said, we're not at the front of the pack. I'm guessing the front of the pack runners don't make those stops, but
yeah,
you run towards the end, and everybody is stopping at every table, and
yeah.
it's a good time.
So, speaking of having a good time, what other events are usually held in conjunction with a marathon?
So the very first thing you do is you go to race packet pickup. And this is where you'll receive your bib, your timing chip, race swag, which is typically a shirt, or sometimes some of the bigger races give out a jacket. And some of the bigger races actually have a race expo. So you go to a convention center and they've got the packet pickup there, but then they've also got like race merchandise. So if you want like finisher shirt, or you want a hat or some other type of race swag, you could buy that. There are vendors there selling race accessories. So if you need some socks or some sunglasses, or sometimes they sell running shoes, hydration, fuel, all the things that you might need for race day, you could find it there. And there's sometimes scheduled speakers. So the one we went to this past weekend, they had a schedule of some local people to Tulsa, but then they also had some other runners speak. And in fact, one of the races that I ran in Des Moines, we got to meet Jeff Galloway, who is an Olympic runner. So
I see.
get to see some fun people. And then some races will allow runners to double up. So, for example, this past weekend, my sister and I ran the 5K on Saturday and the full marathon on Sunday, because, what's 3.1 miles when you're already running 26.2? Some races have a sponsored spaghetti dinner the night before for people who want to carb a load. And then, as I mentioned, some races have a finish line festival. And that finish line festival will be where you pick up your free beer. Sometimes there's food trucks out there. We've been to several that have live music. So, and then some of them have massage therapists, which I've never taken advantage of, but the people laying on the table, they just look like they're in heaven. So it's probably a good thing after you've run a marathon.
Maybe that's something you should take advantage of in the future.
I know, but there's always a line.
So, do you usually take time to explore the cities you visit during your visit?
Yeah. I mean, I say we try to. It's a lot of times we don't want to just rush home after the race. You get stiff. And so it's good to continue to walk around. Another way that I incorporate my love of beer with running is sometimes we'll go to some local craft breweries after the race. We didn't make it to any in Tulsa, but I've been able to add a lot to my Untapped just based on my race journeys.
Right.
Something else that my sister and I've started doing in the last 3 races we've run is go to escape rooms. Like every
Okay.
city
Yeah.
has it these days, and it keeps you on your feet. It's pretty low impact, and plus you get to exercise your brain in addition to your body. So that's pretty fun. But there have been a few races where we've made a vacation out of it. Obviously, when we went up to Disney World or went down to Disney World,
Right.
that was a big one because we brought my husband and kids, and they stayed in the room as we had to wake up at like 2 or 3 in the morning to get to the start line, and then we would come back to the room. We would get ready, and then we would go to a park. And and so it gave them something to do, and then it kept us on our feet, and it just a little added excitement, a little more motivation. When we finish, we can go visit something, or go do something fun.
Right. So you mentioned throughout this that you started running with your sister, and you've run all of these races with your sister. How has running helped you with your relationship with your sister?
So my sister and I, we've always been friends. She's 5 years younger than I am, so it is, we didn't really overlap in school or anything. And it wasn't until I was living in Jefferson City and she was going to school at Mizzou, University of Missouri in Columbia, which is about a 20-25 minute drive, that we
Mhm.
really became close. And then once we started running together, it just accelerated that. We
Yeah.
get to see each other every week. Our weekly long runs is our chance to catch up over the week. I mean, she lives in Kansas City, so we don't live too far from each other. We could go see each
Right.
other anytime, but and we just have so much fun when we travel. We always come back with inside jokes and
Hmm.
stories, and it's really great to have found a best friend like that, and just a perk that we're sisters. And I feel like we're modeling a good sisterhood for my daughters, and hopefully
That's good.
they'll continue to have the same kind of relationship as my sister and I do.
Well, Melissa, this is very interesting. Learning about the marathons, learning about all of your other things that go on in your marathons. One of the things that before I talked to you, I never would have thought about running with all of the beers and the other drinks that people put out during the running. That's something that when you talk to me, I know we talked about it before we met here. That's something that I never would have thought about. But those are things that are definitely interesting. But I appreciate your time here, and I think this is something that was definitely something that I learned is about the running world too. So appreciate your time, and I want to thank you for being the guest on the Actuaries in the Wild.
Yeah, this is great. Thanks, Jeremy.
So, if you're an actuary or you know an actuary who's ventured out into the wild, contact me so we can share your story. You can find Actuaries in the Wild on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So, thank you for joining us, and see you next time on Actuaries in the Wild.